Welcome to Believing the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk. This program is an outpouring of the ministry going on at Calvary Chapel, Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Here's what's coming up in today's message.
Jesus carries scars. He carries them into eternity. He still has them today, doesn't he? But those scars are not from his own rebellion. He carries permanent scars because of our rebellion. Isn't that awesome? In Zechariah chapter 13, when Christ comes back to Israel, they're going to look at him and they're going to say, "What are these wounds in your hands?" And he's going to say, "These are the wounds that I've received in the house of my friends." And for all of eternity, they're going to look at those scars and they're going to remember, we did that.
Did you know there are 7 layers of skin? It's comprised of the 5 layers of the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. There is a specific layer, called the stratum basale, that acts as the barrier between the epidermis and dermis. Once this layer is broken, those minor cuts become scars. Today, Pastor Dan teaches that your past will leave you with many scars, which serve as reminders of where you came from and what you've overcome. They serve as reminders of how Jesus bears scars for you. Now here's Pastor Dan in the book of Exodus chapter 33, as he continues his message, The Grace to Move Beyond Rebellion.
Verse 21, the Lord said, "Okay, behold, there is a place by me, and you shall stand upon a rock. And it shall come to pass," in verse 22, "while my glory passes by, that I will put you in the cleft of a rock." I'm going to tuck you into the rocks. "And I will cover you with my hand while I pass by. And I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back parts." Does anybody else have another translation in another version other than back parts? "You will see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen." In verse 23. The back. Okay, the back. A good idea of what he's saying is you will see the after parts or the afterglow. It's sort of like if a storm goes through and then after the storm goes through, there's still a good wind, okay? That's what he's saying. I'm not going to reveal myself to you when I'm right there, but after I go through, you'll see this afterglow of what I left behind. So just it's a horrible example, but all I could picture is, which is the Peanuts gang? Which is the one with the dirt cloud behind him? Is that Linus? Pigpen, right? Okay. That's all I can picture is like, there goes Pigpen. That's him. But then there's this cloud of dirt. Picture that in the opposite way. It's this cloud of awesomeness that's going behind God. And that's kind of the idea of what Moses gets. I mean, God's hand comes off of Moses just in time for Moses to look up and be like, "What was that must have just went by?" He's just blown away by like this awesomeness, whatever that afterglow was. And that was as close as any man has ever gotten to seeing God right there. All because Moses asked. I mean, when was the last time you said to God, "God, would you please just teach me? God, would you please just help with it?" I mean, he does some amazing things when we just simply ask. Keep ourselves in that place where we are in fellowship with God, like Moses, and you can ask. And God will often grant these things. See, sin will separate you, but there is always a God of grace right there that is ready to bring you deeper. Deeper. Somewhere in Psalm 84, the psalmist says, "Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere." And that's exactly what we're seeing here. One day, Moses with God is so much better than 1,000 days being like Israel. Picture Israel like in their tents. And then like maybe one of the kids looking out the window of the tent and they're like, "Hey Dad, there goes Moses again." And everybody in the family gets up and they run to the front door and they get out and they just watch. There goes Moses. He's going to have fellowship with God again. Wow. Right? But they don't have it. They don't have it. Better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. 1,000 days standing at the front door of your tent watching somebody else go off and have intimate fellowship is nothing compared to having it for yourself. So there it is. The whole chapter here is representing this closeness that Moses has, but the separation that the people have. So we're going to transition into chapter 34. And I find this interesting that in the first 8 verses of chapter 34, it shows another effect of their rebellion and their sin. Because if you remember, when Moses came down from the mountain and he saw them worshiping and partying in a way that did not please God, Moses said, oh, you want to break the commandments? Moses took the 10 commandments and snapped them on the ground. You want to break the commandments? There, I'll help you. Let me help you break the commandments. And he broke the 2 tables of stone right in front of them. Now in this chapter 34, they got to redo that because it's God's plan. They need to have these 10 commandments written on tables of stone. So they're going to get redone. But redoing something does not carry the blessing of the first time. So take a look at this as we open this up. The second effect of sin you're going to see is scars. They're scars. Scars of remembrance. What is a scar to you? What is a scar? What does that mean? When you think of having a scar, it probably insinuates at least 2 things. It insinuates there's something that happened back then. But it also insinuates I still have something. There it is, right there. I remember when I was da-da-da and this happened and then I got the wound and, right? So a scar does not just say something happened back then. A scar also says, I carry that with me today. And that's true. When we rebel against God and we turn from his ways, we go into sin and we do things our way, oh, there can be forgiveness. There can be a scab. There can be healing. But it's there. You did it. There's a scar that forms. So take a look at chapter 34 as it opens up, verse 1. The Lord said unto Moses, hew thee 2 tables of stone. God told Moses, Moses, you go cut some stone, like unto the first. And I will write upon these tables the words that were on the first tables, which you broke. And be ready in the morning and come up the mountain unto Mount Sinai. By the way, that wasn't like a 5-second walk down the path. Come up the mountain with these tables of stone. And present yourself there to me in the top of the mountain. Verse 3. And no man shall come up with you, neither let any man be seen throughout all the mount, neither let the flocks nor the herds feed before the mountain. In verse 4, he did it. He hewed 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and Moses rose up early in the morning and went up into the Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him. And he took in his hand the 2 tables of stone. So this time Moses has to make the stone tablets. The first time, you could go back and read it a couple of chapters ago, the indication is that God found the stone and God wrote on the stone, there it is, Moses, here's your stones, take them down the mountain. This time, it's Moses, and you carry them up here, and I'll do it again. I'll write it down. And so there's work involved. Moses has to make them. Moses is representing, he's doing for Israel a picture of what they're going through in their mind and in their spirit. He's getting scars. He's having to do the work. He's getting his fingers chipped up from making the stone. He's getting a sore back from going up the mountain with these stones. There's consequences. There's a real consequence to him that he's playing out. See, when lessons have to be retaken, there will always be effects because we didn't pass the test the first time God gave us the test. See, when God says, do this, and we say, no, I'd really rather go through the weeds over here, we're going to get ripped up. We're going to get torn up. And then we finally get back on the path, and guess what? We're still ripped up. We're still torn up from going off the path, right? You ever done that in a 4-wheeler? You're like, I think I know a better path. And then you're like, whoa, what am I doing? You get back on the path, and you're like, all right, we're back on the path. Right? There are still wounds from what we chose to do on our own. Moses is all chipped up and beaten up. Sin leaves those reminders in our life. Sin leaves effects in your brain from what you did. It's a scar. It's something that happened in the past. It's healed over. It's not gone. It's healed over, but it's not gone. It's still there. Every now and again, you look down at it and you're like, oh yeah, I remember when I did that. That was dumb that I did that, right? Think about the battle of Ai in the book of Joshua. Remember, they just conquered Jericho because God gave them the victory in Jericho. And then they go to the little tiny village of Ai and they're like, oh, we don't even need to pray. We're just going to go do this thing because we're awesome. And they lose. They lose this battle of Ai. They have to go back to God and they have to say, God, why did we lose? What happened? We need you, God. And God's like, yeah, you needed me before you went in. And you didn't ask. Now you're asking. But one of the things we miss from that story is they came back to God, they repented, and they're like, God, we're sorry, we didn't include you the first time. And then they go the second time, and what? They win, right? But don't miss something. They lost people in that first battle. People died. There are families that lost loved ones because of that sin and that rebellion. There are permanent scars and damage now to the nation because of that disobedience. And I just think that's a great picture of our sin and our rebellion. When we choose to ignore the Lord and we go get all beaten up and scarred up, it's going to leave real effects in our life, real scars, real scars. I mean, look no further than the idea of having a child out of wedlock or in a maybe in a very bad situation when you're not walking with the Lord. There's plenty of people that went off, living a heathen life, had a child, other things, and then maybe they get saved. Maybe later on they're saved, and now they're walking with the Lord, right? And now all they care about is, I just want to walk with the Lord. I just want to raise my kids with the Lord, with the knowledge of the Lord. And yet this whole thing about trying to raise this child now is that much more difficult. Because maybe the mom is at a distance, or the father, the other person's at a distance. They don't know the Lord. That's a perfect example of what we're talking about. How our rebellion leaves scars in our life. Now that's not going to be the ideal situation. Now it's going to be more difficult, the way things work out. It's not going to be the best it could have been. There's a scar there. There's a scar. I personally know that scar. I know what it means to want the best for other people, but I don't have full control, right? And it's a scar. It's something from the past. Oh, it's healed over, but it still hurts from time to time. You look down and you're like, man, I wish it was like normal again. It's not going to be. But let's not leave it there, because that's not where the story ends, right? Let's press on. Oh, here's another example of that. I want you to hear one more example. Now, this is a fake story. I don't want you to get thinking this is biblical. But I watched a movie recently. It was called Paul the Apostle. Like 1,000 movies are called Paul the Apostle, right? I wish I could tell you the production company or something so you could know this one. But this is what was so neat about this. You know how the New Testament talks about Paul having a thorn in the flesh? And he asked God to take away this thorn in the flesh. And God said, you know what? My grace is sufficient for you. Meaning I'm not going to take this thing away, but I will give you the grace to deal with it as you live your life for me, right? That's true. That's biblical. This movie introduced something to answer that was, they just made it up. But I thought it was an awesome idea. The whole way through the movie, they brought up the idea of all these people. Because what was Paul before he was a believer? He was this Saul of Tarsus going around killing Christians, right? So all through the movie, he has these flashbacks of when he was still Saul and when he was still killing Christians. All through the movie, he's got these flashbacks of killing this person, killing that person, killing that Christian, killing this Christian boy. All through the movie, it's haunting him. And then the cool thing is, and that's a scar to him. The whole way through the movie, he is pounded in his brain with this guilt of, I've killed these Christians. And that's a scar to him. He carries that with him. But the cool thing was, at the end of that movie, they show his beheading in Rome, and then they show him going off into heaven. And how do they end the movie? They end the movie with all of those flashbacks that he saw of all those people. All those people are coming to him in heaven, running to him, smiling. And he feels the forgiveness. And it's awesome. It's awesome. Well, I can look it up for you if you want to know which Paul the Apostle movie that was, but it was awesome. It just showed that perfect culmination of those scars aren't permanent. We can use these scars, right? We can use these scars to our advantage to remind us, don't go back to that. Don't do that again. Jesus carries scars. He carries them into eternity. He still has them today, doesn't he? But those scars are not from his own rebellion. He carries permanent scars because of our rebellion. Isn't that awesome? In Zechariah chapter 13, when Christ comes back to Israel, they're going to look at him and they're going to say, what are these wounds in your hands? And he's going to say, these are the wounds that I've received in the house of my friends. And for all of eternity, they're going to look at those scars and they're going to remember, we did that. It was our rebellion that caused that. I'm not going to do that again. So just let these scars in our minds, maybe it's a scar on your body, I don't know. Let these scars remind us, I am not going to do that again. That was rebellion to God. And by his grace, I am going to move forward. And by God's grace, we're going to move forward in this message, okay? But before we can, we're going to read verse 5 through 8 to sum up this section, and then we're going to move forward, okay? So verse 5, Moses makes these new tablets of stone. Verse 5, the Lord descended in a cloud, and he stood with him there, and he proclaimed the name of the Lord. So as God's going to write on these tablets of stone the Ten Commandments, the Lord is going to proclaim who he is in all of his greatness. It's pretty cool. Watch this. In verse 6, the Lord passed by before him, and he proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgressions and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children unto the third and the fourth generation. And Moses made haste, and he bowed his head towards the earth, and he worshiped. So as the Lord is writing on these 10 commandments, he's declaring who he is. He's reaffirming the covenant with Israel. He's redoing the tables of stone, and he's proclaiming who he is. This is what's so fascinating. It's a great reminder that the Lord's character has the ability to go beyond our scars. He's proclaiming in his character, I am gracious. I am long-suffering. I will be good to you yet, Moses. I will be good to you yet, Israel. Even though you were separated from me, even though you have these scars, I will still be gracious yet to you. That's awesome. That's the God you serve. That this is not the end of the story. If we stop this message right here and we're like, wow, Israel's at a distance, they've got these scars, this is hard. That would be hard. That is not the end of the story. God is gracious and he wants them to go beyond. And that's where this picks up now in verse 9, is that we go into some cures for this. God is not going to leave Israel right there in this depressed state of thinking about their sin. There's a moment to think about your sin. There is. But then you need to move on like this. Okay? And this is how he wants them to move on. The first thing we need to do to get beyond this is begin to collaborate with God. Okay? It's almost the exact opposite of being separated from God. Now we need to start collaborating with God. We need to start working hand in hand with God. God's doing something, we're doing something. We need to start collaborating with him. Watch how this happens in verse 9. Verse 9. And he said, if now I have found grace in your sight, O Lord, let my Lord, I pray thee, go among us. For it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquities and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. And he said, behold, and this is the Lord now talking in verse 10. He said, behold, I make a covenant before all the people. I will do marvels, such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among which thou art shall see the work of the Lord. For it is a terrible thing that I will do unto thee, or do with thee. A terrible thing. That word in the scripture just means an awesome thing, like an amazing thing. That's what it means when he says, I'm going to do a terrible thing. Don't think of your modern definition, it's going to be bad. No. He means I'm going to do something amazing with you. So God is declaring we're going to do this thing and we're going to do it big. Okay? Verse 11. Observe thou that which I command thee this day. Behold, I will drive out before thee the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. So God is declaring we're going to do amazing marvels. I'm going to drive out all the people in the land of Canaan. The Lord says, I'm going to drive them out. And it's going to be an amazing thing how that happens. Like in Jericho, right? Where Jericho's way more fortified and better than they are. But yet God makes them win. God's going to do amazing things to kick out these Canaanites. So here the Lord is reaffirming the covenant with Israel, and he says that he will do the work. of driving out the Canaanites. Remember, we're going to collaborate with the Lord. We're going to come together. His part, to defeat the Canaanites, to bring them into the land. Israel's only part in defeating these nations in the land of Canaan, like Jericho and all these, their only part is what? To believe that God is going to do an amazing thing, right? They don't have to be strong. They don't have to be brave. All they have to do is believe. So when God says, go march around the city 7 times, okay, God said so. Here we go. Right? Blow trumpets. Yeah, because that wins wars. Right? But God said it. We're going to do it. Okay? Their only part was believe. God's going to defeat the nations. Just do it the way God says, and you will win. So after God defeats the nations, then Israel has a role to play, as God will allow them to come into a collaboration. God will give them a part to play after the nations are defeated, after God defeats the nations. See, this is very parallel with the idea that we don't have to defeat sin in our lives. They don't have to go into Canaan and defeat the nations. We don't have to defeat sin. God defeats the sin. Jesus Christ defeated sin on the cross. He defeated it. He won. You can't. You cannot defeat sin. He did it. It had power over you and I until he defeated it on the cross. You were helpless to get out of it, and then he defeated it. Now, go into our part, verse 12. Okay? His part, I'm going to go in and I am going to defeat these nations for you. You just have to believe that I'm going to do it. Now, our part, verse 12. Take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you're going, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. In other words, don't make an agreement with these nations that you're going to go kick them out. Don't make an agreement to have them stay with you. Don't do that. Don't make partnerships. Don't make trade arrangements. Don't do it. Verse 13. But you shall destroy their altars and break their images and cut down their groves. These are all religious places. Verse 14, for you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. We talked about that, right? Jealousy is not bad always. It's almost always bad. But it is not bad when it's referring to God. God has the right to be jealous. If you are married to a gentleman, if you are married to a lady, and you see this lady giving her affection to somebody else, you have the right to be jealous, right? That is a righteous jealousy. God has a right to be jealous if you give your affections and love to something else. He has a right to be jealous. He's a jealous God. We deserve to give him our affections, right? So God says, don't make covenants with these idol-worshiping nations in the land. Verse 15, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a-whoring after their gods, and do sacrifices unto their gods. And one call thee, and you eat of his sacrifice. Verse 16, and you shall take of their daughters and unto your sons, and their daughters go a-whoring after their gods, and make these sons go a-whoring after their gods. Thou shalt make thee no molten gods. So all of that is saying, don't come into a relationship with these idol-worshiping nations. You're going to end up going to a deep level of intermarrying with them. Your sons will marry their daughters, and your daughters will marry their sons, and it will all turn to idol-worshiping. So God is saying, I will defeat these nations. When we go into the promised land, God himself will defeat these nations, not because of Israel's ingenuity, not because of Israel's might in battle. God's going to defeat them. But then he says, you have a part to play. God says, I want you to collaborate with me. Your part to play is get rid of them. After they're defeated, get rid of them.
Thanks for tuning in to Believing the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk. Today, Pastor Dan has been exploring the wonders of the book of Exodus. Isn't it interesting that no matter what great and miraculous thing God has done in the past, it's easy to forget that and worry about what's right in front of you. As we get further into Exodus, you start to see that play out with the Israelites. He rescues them from the oppression of Egypt, doing unheard of signs and wonders. But then when they face the Red Sea, they soon turn to complaints and distrust of God's goodness and provision. We can be guilty of similar reactions to God's ways. He got you through that really hard circumstance last year, but you're already doubting that He'll come through with the present trial. Exodus reminds us that, as humans, we fall short in our belief of what God can do. But we're also reminded that God does come through for His people. His bigger picture perspective is greater than our human minds can comprehend. Let's look forward to seeing how God will deliver in ways that make no sense otherwise. If today's message has brought you some significant realizations, we'd love to hear from you. You can call 717-500-1102 to share thoughts or prayer requests. That's 717-500-1102. You can also reach out on Facebook or visit our website at cchambersburg.org. You've been listening to Believing the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk.